Welcome to your Unique Brilliance podcast with Nicola Salter, bringing you a weekly fresh flow of guidance, inspirations, powerful tips, and conversations designed to help you create your vision, discover your greatest diamond potential, and begin living the life you want. This is about empowering your truth, your choice, and your voice. Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of your Unique Brilliance podcast with me, Nicola Salter. And to celebrate my 50th episode, yes, I can hardly believe it either, I'm going to be introducing a very, very special guest who's going to share with us how and why it's so important to keep going with your dreams no matter what, with no attachment to the outcome, and riding the waves of life as she has done for a very, very long time with some amazing stories. And she is someone who deserves, in my opinion, to be called a true master of life, as she's moved from many different perspectives of life, from the Second World War to the modern day tech of our world today, making huge leaps and bounds in her own personal life with a ton of change and how she's managed this. Plus, I'm going to be sharing with you today a couple of my own personal adventures, which I hope will entertain you and that were actually requested by some of you, which I thought was very curious, but I'm happy to do so. And I will be sharing with you in a few moments who will be sharing my mic with me today. Now, I remember doing my first few episodes of this podcast here in my closet during the fires last year that we had in California, and there were evacuation warnings going on. My bags were packed just in case I had to leave, and really just to leave to get out of the smoke because the air quality was so terrible, and drive to the coast to get out of this. But as I waited to hear more news, I decided, I'm on a mission and a purpose with my podcast. I chose to do one episode per week. That was my initial goal for this first run of episodes. So in order to do that, the day the fires began was the start of my podcast recording schedule. So there I was. It was so hot, no AC, and I had to strip down to the bare minimum. Thank goodness there were no cameras around, and the fires were very, very close. And I decided that I would just start recording in my closet because this is the quietest place that I have. And I had my cell phone next to me in case there was going to be an emergency. But oh boy, did I have fun. Although I didn't realize during those first recordings that you could hear me rasping with the poor air quality. I sounded like a fish out of water because of the air, but I did it, and it completely took my mind away from the concern of fires for a short while. And that was when I first started recording. So with this podcast, so much has come with it. So many unexpected things have come up from this podcast that I'm so grateful for. And the guests who have been kind enough to share their time with all of their scheduling issues that they've had and their recording challenges. I mean, I even ended up once sitting in my bathroom on the floor with the mic on the toilet seat. Oh, yes. Equipment issues were happening at that point too, and I couldn't get my Wi-Fi except for in the bathroom, and not even realizing that my mic was pointing in the wrong direction for a couple of episodes until we worked out why my sound and my volume was a bit off. And also, with these episodes having sometimes a lack of creative flow. What was I going to do for a certain episode? And my designer, Chase, who I'm so grateful for, who always manages to stitch these episodes in the nick of time. And when there's been lost episodes that somehow disappeared into the black hole after I've recorded them, he's patiently coached me into how to re-find them. And I tell you, if you do find some of those episodes that I just still can't find, or if any aliens find them floating around in space, please return them to me. So these podcasts have brought many different adventures, including, I have to say, guests who have said to me very kindly, they've shared feedback with me that some of the questions that I've asked them have helped to develop a new perspective and insights for themselves. And they've gone off to actually make some changes in their own lives and actually identify their qualities and strengths and see themselves in a new way, which is just the most exciting thing ever to me. So that's also been such a lovely, lovely plus from doing this. And, you know, balancing podcasts with my usual work life and friends and family has created the need for friends and family to also be patient enough with me whilst I've been writing and recording. And for everyone out there doing podcasts, I'm sure you'll resonate with me. That they may have the same issue. It takes time to do this, and it does take you away sometimes from those other situations. So to friends and family for being patient with me, thank you so much. And also thank you for listening. You know, there are times when I'm sitting just talking into my mic, wondering who will listen to this. But I just imagine all of you out there and hope that what I'm bringing is hitting the mark. And I just love being a messenger. So, you know, the title of, this episode this week is Yes, I Can Do This. Yes, I can. And that's what I've done with this podcast. It's an accomplishment that I'd hesitated to step into, but I've loved every single minute because it's brought so much to me. It's been so enriching. And I think repeating, yes, I can do this on a regular basis, whatever you are doing, really helps to reset your energy field and your brain. And just checking in on all of those times when you were training, let's say, for a race or a marathon or going to the gym or some kind of daily practice, you did do it in the end. It just took some time. Look at those times when you did accomplish something, even if it did feel like it was a stretch, you did it. And that's how I'm also looking at this podcast. And there will be times when life seems to be conspiring against you. I mean, look at the fires, and there's been other fires too that have come and gone, and other life challenges I've also had. And life seems to be conspiring against you, and it becomes difficult to churn out or do whatever it is that you want. Just listen. Maybe you're not supposed to be doing it right now, because in time it could grow into something better. Or maybe you are doing it, and the challenge is to focus on what is really needed and not look at what is distracting you. Only your heart can tell you and what feels right. So here is a personal story that I have to share. I remember when I was working in London, and the organisation I was working with was sending out an envoy to Beirut to check up on some work that we were doing out there to promote the hospitality and tourism industry and help bring Beirut back to its former glory. Unfortunately, the war in Beirut hadn't quite finished, as I was soon to find out. And I just knew when I was in this job in London that I wanted to go to Beirut. I wanted to be a part of this envoy and have the experience and go with my colleague who was called Peter. And I wanted to be the envoy to cover the story that he was working on for publicity purposes. And I'm not sure which side of insanity I was coming from, but shortly after asking, or I should say actually persuading our CEO that I should go, or I had to go, I found myself on a plane flying to Beirut with Peter. Now, during the flight, the air stewardess kept loading me up with all these small bottles of alcohol, Bombay Sapphire gin. And I said to her, I'm never going to drink all these. And she laughed and said, just put them in your hotel refrigerator when you get there. Well, I was like, okay, whatever. And Peter's like, yeah, take him. That's great. I was like, all right. So we arrived in Beirut, and we arrived at the airport, and ye gods, there were armed soldiers everywhere, checkpoints. I already felt like a criminal, that I'd done something wrong. And I whispered to Peter, this doesn't feel like a good touristy place just yet. Are we too early coming here to do this? And he just grinned. He said, "Oh, you'll get used to it," because he's been there a number of times. So we were picked up in an open Jeep and whisked past hundreds of burned and bombed out buildings that looked like huge chunks of Swiss cheese with holes in them. I swear I've never seen anything like it. Power lines were down all over the roads, and there was just this smell of pungent smoke in the air. And I remember nervously looking at Peter, and he'd been in the Marines, so he was as calm as a cucumber. And he said, well, you did insist on coming. I did try to warn you. So this was the first, yes, I can do this moment that I can remember avidly. And we got to the hotel, which seemed fine. But later that day or that evening, I learned that the UK journalist John McCarthy had been kidnapped from the same hotel a year prior. I was like, oh no. So I sent a hasty fax to my loved ones because there were no emails back then or cell phones to let them know I was okay. But I couldn't quite help thinking this could be a really rough trip. And I was so not prepared for this. Yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this became my mantra, which started running in my head as I pulled myself out of catastrophizing about the potential of being kidnapped, like John McCarthy had been, and that same thing could happen to me. So I had to really distract my brain and focus on what was really important at the moment and become very vigilant. I cannot tell you how I was able to practice my skills of being present in those moments. So once I got over the sounds of gunfire in the distance, because part of the city was still under gunfire, which was so sad to me and so sad because Beirut was like Paris on the Mediterranean. It was beautiful. Peter and I got out to go and visit the Minister of Tourism and Hospitality. And, we were getting out to do these interviews and go to these tourism and hospitality schools that had been bombed out. But the students were still confidently growing their skills and their crafts as chefs to work in local hotels and build this tourism industry. It was just really absolutely incredible. And they was faced with such austerity and this terrible sense of loss. And so there was certainly a lot of, yes, I can do this going on with them as well. So in one of the interviews I had to do with the Minister of Tourism through Peter, women were not allowed usually in the same room as the minister, but I was permitted to sit at the back and shoot my questions for the interview from there. So, of course, I was from London, I was indignant at first, but realized that the amount of guns and ammunition around me was kind of threatening, and I decided it was probably the safest option just to say, quiet. So the interview went well, and I think the minister even appreciated my candor, which was a big yahoo for women. So remember, this is at a time when women couldn't even wear pants to work in London, let alone have a woman sit in the same room as a man in Beirut. But I wasn't fazed. I was loving the experience. I was loving the food. I was loving the smells, and I was loving the people. They were so, so sweet and compassionate. So the trip continued with quite a few adventures, I should say. I mean, really too many to mention here. And, there was a moment where I really pondered following my love for journalism while I was there, or whether I should go into the mentoring field in the work of energy medicine. And I was really in conflict about these two as I was just experiencing life and interviewing and, telling stories. But that conflict in terms of what I was going to do ended on my last day while I was there because there was a military coup. And I remember thinking that the universe probably answered my questions about becoming a journalist because military coups are not fun. If you get stuck in a country where they are having a coup, you can't leave for quite a while. And we were given a warning that we had to pack up and be out of the hotel within a 20-minute period. And the hotel got us a taxi. So armed with my brand new hookah pipe that I just bought in a market, plus other goodies, Peter and I raced to the airport, and we got stuck in all this chaotic traffic and ended up running into the airport. I was feeling really panicked as we checked in because we may not have made this plane. And getting through security and with the grace of the travel angels, pathways just opened up for us as we literally raced across the tarmac to the British Airways plane, still clutching my hookah pipe, thinking, I don't think I could be a journalist doing this kind of coverage in the war in a different country. I just don't think this is for me. As I ran up the steps onto the plane, all hot and sweaty, and I'll never forget the stewardess. She was the same as the one before when I flew out. She looked at me and she smiled and she said, "Welcome aboard British Airways flight 77, I think it was." Smiled. She took my hookah and placed it in the compartment for storage. And I sat there shaking, thinking I was in such a different world within this plane, this capsule, compared to what was going on 5 minutes away. The the difference, the opposites that was going on was absolutely mind-blowing. Well, obviously made it back to London. It was an adventure and a trip that I wrote a lot about, got a lot of magazine coverage for the organization I was working for. But, fear, self-doubt, questioning, these emotions plus loads of others visited me during that particular trip. But I had to pull on that super vigilant mode, that centeredness, and deal with it as I faced it and embraced it. And I had such a great experience amongst the fear and came back into my center. What I feel was more centered, stronger, realistic, perhaps improved perspective person, having had that challenge. Every opportunity that comes your way, take it. Open up to face and embrace whenever you can. It will bring riches beyond your imagination. I have other adventures, just as I'm sure you do. They have all shaped us because we said, yes, I can. And now it is my greatest pleasure to introduce you to a wonderful woman who has taught me to say, yes, I can for most of my life because she did. And she is my mom, Pamela. And here she is, everyone, my beautiful mom, Pamela Lowe, also named as Pamela Jackson from when she was a young girl. And Mom, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much for asking me. I'm looking forward to this hour.
We're very excited to have you, and I'm really excited for the listeners to hear some of your wisdom and knowledge because, as I said earlier, you're from a generation who's had to take huge leaps of faith with learning, learning, embracing change at the ultimate level because you were born in the Second World War. You then went through the 60s and a new way of thinking back then through the 80s, and then now learning all this technology, which you're amazing at because you've embraced that. You use emails and texts. You're incredible. As well as running businesses. You had your own business. You worked with Dad running a business, raising us two girls, and then sadly going through loss with Dad passing and then your second husband, Terry, passing too. You're phenomenal in my eyes, and I'm super proud of you, and I can't wait to dive into this. So let's just start at the beginning because I know you've got some amazing stories about growing up in World War II. Just tell us briefly how old you were during the war and about the Blitz bombing and how you and your parents coped.
I was born in 1938 and the war started in 1939, so I was still a baby. And but I had a very happy childhood, considering we were going through a war. All I really can remember is happiness and laughing and doing lots of things. When I was a toddler, with my dad in the garden, because we grew all our own vegetables, and we had chickens and cleaning out chicken runs. And it did me a lot of good for all my life, actually, because it was very family-orientated. And you were with the family and doing things, like growing your own food and things, which really has always stayed with me, to do that. But of course it wasn't a happy time for my parents or anybody else, but for children I can remember just laughing. Digging the chicken run with my father, pulling all the worms out and putting them down his boots and laughing and him chasing me and the chickens. And that's what I can remember.
That's what you remember. That's amazing because, like you said, it must have been awful for them, but you still had it filled with laughter because you didn't know any different. What do you think it was about the war that brought everyone together?
Well, we didn't lock front doors. Everybody helped one another, and it was a very unselfish time. It was, we had lots of fruit trees, so, you'd give them to the neighbours, and then they'd give you things, and it was everybody helped one another. It was different to what it is now.
Yeah, there was more of a level of trust.
You had to, because everybody was going through a very terrible time.
Yeah.
Now, my father wanted to go into the Air Force, but he was turned down all the time, not because of his health, because he was wanted in England, because he did some of the designing for the mosquito plane, so he was well wanted in England. But he was locked in a factory at night. No cars to get you there, cycled everywhere.
Right.
And my mum was only 24 when I was born.
Wow.
And there she was on home and taking me down to an air raid shelter when the warning went off at night. I can remember this. And going down, being in a shelter at the bottom of the garden through snow and rain and all that, and no heating, nothing. And I can remember waking up one night screaming and saying that a bomb had blown all my hair away because Mum had knitted hats, because you didn't have sleeping bags or anoraks as you have now, and you had to do your knitting. And she'd made me this funny hat, so I looked like a cat with whiskers with it on. And of course it covered my hair, and I didn't usually go to bed in a hat. I thought my hair had all blown away.
I mean, that must have been terrifying in of itself. What was the bomb shelter like when you went into it? I mean, what did it actually look like?
I can remember the buzz bombs. I can remember them stopping. And there was another one called the V bomb. And it used to stop, make a noise. And it had fire coming out of the back of it.
Right.
And there was nobody on board, obviously. And it would stop. And once you'd heard the sound go away and it stopped, you knew you had to run. Because it then glided and then
it dropped.
Exploded, yeah.
And then that's when you ran. Well, you were either in the bomb shelter when the alarms went off, or you would run.
Oh, no, you heard the planes were coming.
Okay.
The German planes were coming. You just got under cover. We did have a plane go. A German plane got in to behind where my parents lived. And it came so low that it was shooting all the fences along the back. I can remember that. I can remember standing on top of the air raid shelter and looking at London on fire. And all the sky was bright orange and red. And
I mean, what did you think at that age when you were watching that?
I don't know, because I was brought up in it. You thought it was an everyday occurrence.
I mean, it's astonishing, really. And, everybody in your era was going through this. And what do you think that you learned about the value of life and simple things at that age?
Well, it was just your life. You didn't know any different.
Amazing.
Not at all. I mean, then I went to school, and all the friends knocked for one another, and we walked to school together and picked up all the silver that came out of the plane for the radars, see who get the most silver paper before we got to school. Get into school, air raid warning going off, straight into the air raid shelters at the school, singing London's Burning and 10 green bottles hanging on the wall. So I really didn't have many lessons either, because we was always in bomb shelters.
And you didn't have lessons either because of this going on. I mean, and then where you went from that and then into business, which we'll dive into in a short while, is quite extraordinary. How do you think this impacted the rest of your life, being in the war and having these experiences?
It probably made me stronger.
Yeah.
And I did hairdressing when I left school.
Hairstyling, everybody, for everyone listening out there. We call it hairdressing in England. Hairstyling here in the US, yes.
And I wanted to be a hairstylist.
No, you're good. You can call it
from the age of 8. I don't know why. I didn't know anybody who did this, but and when I started, I hated it. I didn't like it, what I was doing. But then I got to like it. And when I was 21, I opened my own hairdressing salon. And I just loved it. It was my baby. And it didn't worry me at all at that age, opening a business.
I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? I had another lady on the show the other week. She was 24 and she'd already had 2 successful businesses, and she's 24. You're right. At that age, I think we can do most things. And so you were only 21, a great hair salon in London. You'd had training for it, hadn't you?
Yes,
you'd
5
apprenticed.
years.
And
5 years.
you have some funny stories. Give me a couple of stories about that apprenticeship before you opened your salon. You have to hear this, listeners. You have.
I worked for a lady who was not a well lady, shall we say. And I'd go to her. She wouldn't speak And sometimes you went in and you say, "Good morning." I won't mention names in case anybody remembers her. and she said, "Pamela, the mice have been in again."
The mice?
The mice. And they've turned all the gas taps on. Well, if you'd have seen this salon, we had to make our own shampoo every day.
Did
we
you
had
really?
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh.
And then we had to make our own setting lotions. And you had to boil them on this old gas cooker to mix them and then pour them into chrome containers.
Okay.
You had Brilliantine in one,
right,
setting lotion in t'other, and a large one like a vase for the shampoo. And you had to wash the hair with boiling hot water in the shampoo, otherwise you didn't have any lather.
Okay.
Well, this used to boil all over this cooker, so how a mouse could walk across the taps and turn it on when it was completely stuck together with shampoo and setting lotion, I'll never know. But we'd have the police in to say we'd had burglars.
Which you hadn't. She would
No,
imagine.
Which it was all imagination.
She's what we call paranoia and catastrophizing type personality.
And she would not have any heating in the shop. And she used to heat all the pipes with candles, so we had candles.
Oh, yeah. So everyone listening, I did not believe this story when I first heard it, but Mom has repeated the story over the years, and it has to be true. She put candles under, every 12 inches?
Yes.
She put candles?
And lit them.
And lit the candles, and then under the pipe. Did it work?
No, it was freezing. I got frostbite. The doctor had never seen frostbite.
Oh my goodness, by working. So you stayed at this. I mean, you were having these horrendous experiences as an apprentice, but you stayed at this. And then you went to, what was it, stage school or something to do hair? You were doing wig making.
I went to colleges after work every day. I did apprenticeship and then went to different schools. No, I did historical hairdressing.
Okay.
And that's what I really liked to do. And we were learning to do muscle waving with the hot irons.
Yeah.
And you should go in front of your nose with the irons. So I had a permanent blister on my nose. And when I burnt myself, and one day, good job, it was a weft of hair. I put the irons into this weft of hair and came out when the weft of hair was on the irons because I'd burnt it. I mean, it was silly. But I had a fantastic apprenticeship.
Yeah.
I met lovely people, and it was fun, actually.
And you still carried on. This is your purpose. You wanted your own hair salon, and you opened your own hair salon. You were 21, and what was the name of your hair salon?
Pamela Jackson. I wanted it called Antoinette.
Right.
Because it was in such a pretty road called Queen Anne's Place, and it was a very pretty-looking shop with all the draped curtains, and it was very attractive.
Yeah, I remember it. It was lovely.
And I wanted it called Antoinette, but my father, who was a shop fitter and was fitting out the shop, said, no, she had her head cut off. So he called it Pamela Jackson, and...
I mean, you think about it, he had such a great sense of humour.
Oh,
you couldn't open a shop called Marie Antoinette and she was beheaded back in the day. That wouldn't be a good marketing angle, would it? But, we grew up with you, I grew up with you having this salon for a short while, and so I was used to you being in business and being a mum with a business, and it was quite unusual in those days, wasn't it? Because you were still being the traditional mum, having the family over every Sunday, everybody would sit down, have a meal, you would work 6 days, go get the dinners together for the family, and you'd have like a sit down of like 10, 12 people.
No freezers, no washing
machines. I mean, it was pretty amazing how you kept all this together. And how did you do it?
And also, I couldn't drive.
No.
So I had to walk everywhere with you in your beautiful white bassinet pram.
Oh, yes.
And we walked so much, Nicola, that I wore the tyres off my pram. And it was a Wilson pram, and nobody would have worn a tyre off a pram like that, but I did.
But you did, because you were always, you have to admit, you were running, weren't you, everywhere?
I did run.
You were trying to keep on top of everything.
They used to call me a galloping hairpin.
A galloping hairpin. So, and you knew as you were running your business that you had all these family responsibilities and the business, and you were balancing all of it, and yet you were so busy, weren't you? What did you put your success down to with the salon? I mean, you were booked up for weeks.
I could tell you today what I was doing next year this time.
Wow.
I was completely booked. I loved doing it.
Yeah.
I say it wasn't hard work for me.
No, because it was part of you and it was part of your passion.
I had been registered partially sighted in that time as well. In 1968 or so, I was registered partially sighted. Told I was going blind, but I was still doing hairdressing, and then I cut Nicola's earlobe through, and I thought it's about time I finish because it did bleed a lot. But I still did it, didn't I? I did it at home.
I think everyone's probably just catching up to the fact that you said that you were registered as partially sighted as you moved into the 60s, and this is a new decade, if you like. There was a new way of thinking. It was more modern, wasn't it? There were lots of changes. It was all about freedom, and I remember you wearing your caftans and you and your dad looking super trendy in the clothes that you were wearing, and so there was a new way of thinking, and it was, I don't know, was it exciting at the time? It was?
Well, we'd come out of a dark time.
Right.
And although the war finished in 1945-46, it didn't really finish then. We were still rationed until the mid-50s. And we still had 2 ounces of meat each a week. Thank goodness we had our own chickens and things. But, it was still a very dark time. Yeah,
it was a dark time. And then you moved into the 60s, which got lighter. And just as you and Dad were getting, your lives together and you were setting up a business with him, this is when you found out that you had the eye disease.
Yes.
Right? And this must have been, devastating. What were your symptoms? How did this all start?
I realised I couldn't see in the dark. I had night blindness. The doctors thought it was a vitamin deficiency, but it wasn't. And then it went to tunnel vision, and it was started at night. But during the day, I started saying hello to trees in the road when I walked into them, and it's because I just couldn't see them. And they couldn't make out what the disease was. They thought I had a brain tumour, but I didn't, thank goodness. And they found out in 1975 I had retinitis pigmentosa, which is the biggest form of blindness in the world now.
Yes, and we're going to put that retinitis pigmentosa charity site up on my website and also up on iTunes so people can link into the website and make a donation if they'd like. We'll talk more about that in a moment. I remember you saying to me when you had the diagnosis, you walked back from the doctors and feeling relieved it wasn't a tumour, but you felt like, well, this is just what I have to bear in this lifetime. And you said that to me just a few months ago. I'd never heard you say that before. So what was it you said? You found out what it was?
I was on my own. I phoned the doctor up to see my results, and he said, come and see me now, because it was only the next road. I don't want to tell you on the telephone. So I went round on my own, went midday, and he said, now I want you to go home and get your crying out over because you're going blind. You haven't got a brain tumour. And I remember standing up and putting my hand on his shoulder and saying, oh, well, that's good. I can cope with that one.
Wow.
And I did. I don't know why I did that, but I did. And walking home, I was thinking, and I felt as if I had the crucifix on my arm. And this is absolutely true. It was a large cross, and it went down my back onto the ground behind me and up. And then the long pole the cross was on was in front of me, walking in front of me. And I thought, this is my cross to bear for the rest of my life, so I will never be ill with anything. And that's how I've gone through my life. If I go to the doctors and I sit there, I think, well, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with me. And a very silly way of thinking, but that's how I thought.
And this is also how you got through with your eyes too, didn't you?
Yes.
As we were all growing up together with you challenged with this, you never had any therapy around this, did you?
Nobody had therapy. You got on with it.
You're right. This is the mindset from
an 81-year-old, which is fabulous. And you basically shifted your mindset. This is what you did to say, okay, this is what I have. And you've been very strong, and you rarely get anything health-wise. You're very healthy. And
then I did a typing test, didn't I?
And I was going to get to that. Yes, I remember that. Even though you didn't let you deter you. And this was my next piece I wanted to share with the listeners, for everyone out there, because, a lot of us do get labels for various health issues or disabilities. And what you did was you shifted it around. You went off to learn typing. And you then worked with Dad, didn't you?
Yes, I loved that.
You loved that because Dad had his own business and was working for some large companies, and you had a studio out in the back garden, didn't you?
We did. Yes, it was a film company.
It was a film company doing production and doing shows and events that you were doing together. And so you didn't let that stop you either. And I know that, again, Julia and I were growing up with our parents in business. So this was just a very normal upbringing for us, which inspired both of us to have our own businesses and be entrepreneurs, having watched you both do it. But we also watched you struggle with challenges. And we watched as Dad lost his business in the fire. I mean, do you remember that?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, it was devastating. He lost a life's work, didn't he?
He did, and never got over it.
Yeah, his photo library, and then it was such a shock that we think that contributed to his passing away at the age of 46, right? Yeah, he was very, very young. So Mum, again, then was holding this business down, and then Dad had passed away, so we had to then wrap up the business. And
we had to burn down, darling. There was nothing to wrap up.
There was that. Sorry, this is, it's very true. There's nothing to wrap up, but at the same time, there was, clients and
house was falling down.
But yeah, I was going to say, you were also managing with the house with its foundations. So as Dad passed away, you were going blind very quickly.
Yes, I've been registered blind.
Yeah, you're still managing, and the house was going through subsidence and needed to be fixed. So you had that going on as well.
A broken leg.
And she'd broken her leg, everybody. So, so let's just look at this in the bigger perspective. During this time with everything happening, where did you go within you to get through this?
Well, you just had a laugh, really, because I had no furniture. Mm-hmm. I had a stream running through the middle of the house. Didn't we?
Yes.
It was dreadful.
Yes.
And we had that for 2 years. Mm-hmm. But it brought us together.
It did. It was like another war, wasn't it, really?
It was. Mm-hmm. And people used to say, wasn't it a shame you hadn't moved? Because we were going to move before, when we had the fire. And we couldn't, because the house was starting to move and the back of the house was breaking. Mm-hmm. And I used to look up at that big hole in the wall and think to myself how lucky I was that somebody up there was looking after us, that we hadn't moved. Because if we had moved to Exeter, we were going to, in Devon, you wouldn't have known anybody.
No.
Where Nicola was at college, finishing your college, wasn't you? Mm-hmm. Julia was at school at Northwood. Mm. And I had some wonderful friends around there.
So this is something I wanted to bring up, because in every step of your life and what you've embraced and faced and embraced, as I say, you've had a tribe of people, a community, neighbours, friends who've supported you and that we could all call on it. So I remember when Dad died, we had friends in the community who took us in, basically, didn't they? They were amazing. And this is what's so important for everyone listening out there. It's so important to have that network of people that you can call upon. You don't resist not getting in touch with people. People will help you when asked, and it does help that process. And you were good at making friends too. I mean, you had a huge network of people around you, which was a huge help, wasn't it?
Yes, I was very lucky.
Yeah. In some ways lucky. Some ways.
I know I was. I've been very blessed with my family.
So you see, as Mum's talking, her mindset, her belief patterns have gone from the challenges, and then she flips them. And this is how I've learned, Julia's learned in our lifetimes, to see challenges and embrace them as an opportunity, really, to learn something from them, right? And I don't know if you actually thought you were learning something from them as you went, but as you look back...
Well, I had to keep going, and I used to sell everything.
Yes, you did.
I used to sell everything. Yes. And to keep us going, because we had to survive. Mm-hmm. But I did do slide binding, so I had another business.
Yeah, so slide binding in those days is taking 35 millimeter transparencies and putting them in frames that would then be put into a projector for large shows that used to use slides, didn't they?
Yes.
Rather than video or film at the time. So Mum also had a business doing that. And who was your big client? I can't remember the name of it.
I had 8 ladies working for me.
Right.
Kodak, of course, was
one of her clients.
Electricity bill in Manchester Evening News.
It's a newspaper.
Newspapers in London. Lots of people.
Yeah, because in those days, this was the way of promotion and marketing, wasn't it?
Well, we made our own television adverts.
Right, and so Mum was still running this and having a team of people, and it made good money, didn't it?
It kept us going. It paid for your 21st.
Paid for my 21st birthday. Which I remember so vividly. It was a blast. The house was being fixed at the same time, and we could put whatever we wanted on the walls for decorations, couldn't we? And it was one of the best parties I think I've ever had. Everybody turned out, and we could make a mess. It was awesome. So, and you got us through that too. You're amazing. And you then married again, didn't you? You married again. I have to tell you all, my mum's quite the woman, really. She's got men always floating around her. She's quite.
That's not true.
She's quite the honeybee. No, but she got married again, and to a lovely, lovely dear man called Terry.
Who was a widower.
Who was a widower and a childhood friend, right? And
yes.
Terry had always had his eye on Mum from when he was very young, but of course Mum had gone off and got married to someone else. But these two got together again and really just carved out such a happy time for themselves, even though Terry got quite sick towards the end, and Mum took care of him. I mean, it was 10 years of taking 12 years taking him through some very various serious health issues, and unfortunately he also passed away. But you had a good phase of your life with him, didn't you?
Yes.
To have some happy times with him. He was a lovely man. And now, of course, you're in LA. You're here in LA, away from England, and as you look at your life and this new phase of your life that you are in, or you're beginning, you could say, what is it that you are the most thankful for and excited about now?
I'm with my family, my 2 lovely daughters.
No, thank you.
Because they're the best thing in my life, really.
No.
And the nicest part of my life when they were young. So I'm here, and I have my lovely granddaughter.
Yes.
So I'm seeing her grow up, and I just love it here.
Yes, and I have to say, Mum's been like a duck to water since she's been here. I mean, imagine arriving in a country where you're blind, you don't know where anything is, and you have to trust people around you. I think Mum's biggest quality is trust. She really does trust the people who come in and her companions, and she trusts, which is extraordinary. She gets around. We're not always here, and she's taking care of herself. She's running her own lavender business, selling lavender bags, dried lavender and beautiful lavender bags, and selling them for charity, retinitis pigmentosa, and starting a new circle of friends. So it is never, ever too late. So, Mum, we'd love to hear a precious nugget of wisdom from you about anything in your heart that you'd like to share with us today.
Well, as Nicola did mention earlier on, I had a lovely dad. I had a good mum and dad, but I had especially a lovely father. And my dad suffered quite a lot during the war because of the job he did on aircraft. And he did, but he used to say, if you think of other people and help other people, which he did, it takes the mind off of your own troubles. And it's really true, because if you worry about other people, you don't have time to think about yourself all the time.
That's lovely.
And
thank you.
It was worth it. But thanks to my daughters, I do a lot of things. They forget I'm my age. I'd be falling off a mountain sometime, I think, sometime.
No, we do like to push you to do things.
Yes, you do.
And she does go for it, everybody. She's there.
My cooking.
Mum cooks. She's amazing what she produces for all of us, and her amazing desserts, and we'll get to share. But what you just said about helping other people takes your mind off your own troubles. no one said that on the show in the last 50 episodes that we've had, and I would agree with you. I think that's one of the most powerful things we can do to shift our own mindsets so that we don't become the victim, right? And the poor me, and that we take life and all of what it brings, whether it's the good stuff or the bad stuff, and we go through it.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, you can say one more thing.
If anybody has time, and everybody can spare time in the week, phone an older person up.
There you go.
I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've phoned people who are younger than myself. But my goodness, it does you good as well as them. It really does. And I've made a lot of people, I haven't met these people, but I'm still doing it in America. I still phone a gentleman up at home. I've never met him.
In England?
In England.
Yes.
And he forgets I'm in America because he says to me, my letterbox needs mending. Who can I get over to do it? And I'm thinking,
his letterbox. Oh, how sweet.
But I just talk to him.
Everybody out there, I think that's wonderful. Pick up the phone, call somebody you either haven't spoken to for a long time, or perhaps get yourself involved in a volunteer program where you can call an older person, because, people get isolated, and it is fulfilling, isn't it, when you reach out and you touch someone. Thank you so much, Mom. You've been amazing. And
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I know, it's good, isn't it?
Yes.
It's been great having you here. And Retinitis Pigmentosa is your charity, right?
It is.
And the website...
It's a very good charity.
It is. It's helping fight blindness and help us find a cure for this eye disease. There's different variations of it, and Mum has one particular strain of it. I
have recessive.
Mum has recessive. My sister and I have the genetic component, but we don't have it. But, it does run in families. So Retinitis Pigmentosa, and the website address will be up on my website, NicolaSalter.com, along with iTunes, where you can click and make a donation. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for listening. And Mum, thank you for being with us today and sharing everything that you shared. I know you've got a ton more stories, so perhaps we're going to get you on another episode soon. This was just covering the highlights of all those changes you've gone through, and from the Second World War right up until now, learning how to text message, learning how to send emails, from being in a bomb shelter, when you were young. You've embraced so many life changes and phases in your life. And I think for most of us listening to this, we'll be very impressed hearing your journey. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Your Unique Brilliance podcast. And if you want to define your brilliance and redefine your diamond potential, schedule a personal consultation with me to discover just how you can do that at NicolaSalter.com. While you're there, make sure to subscribe to the show so you will never miss an episode. And if you found value in the show, I would appreciate a rating on iTunes, or simply tell a friend. That would be amazing. You are amazing. Have an empowered week, everyone.